And this is where I really believe that the split in humanity is going to occur. Some people talk about transhumanism. That's great. That's many decades down the road.
Yeah.
I'm talking about immediacy within 1 to 2 years of us needing to make the mental clarity choice. You're either going to accept that system or you're not, because once you get on it, you are at complete subservience to that system. And how many people have panicked when their internet goes off? How many people panic when they can't sign into their online banking? And how many people panic when their card doesn't work?
Yeah.
Either working and sliding it to purchase an item in a credit card at a pay through point, or you can't, your card doesn't work to get money out of the ATM. Okay, that can be turned off in a moment's notice in an instant just because you say the wrong thing. This conversation very well what might have all three of us and our our access to that system cut off.
Yeah.
Thanks.
So
One of the things I wanted to talk about, microgreens here. There's a microgreen tray, there's all kind of solutions that we can think about. Easy to do, easy to implement, low cost, and immediate results almost.
right. As far as solutions go, why don't we bring the audience up to speed and talk about, solutions for what? I know in this, we're always talking about solutions as far as creating our own parallel economies. Is this part of what that can do?
It is. You have to think about the crop losses right now and the enormous amount of vegetable price increases because of the floods in California, the mesospheric ice cloud debacle happening, the Hunga Tonga eruption, had the largest ejective water vapor in the last 200 years, at least since the Tambora eruption. And what's that doing? Well, it's bending atmospheric patterns in the southern hemisphere. There's going to be a lot of crop losses there. Not so much yield. And then what we have going on with Russia and the Ukraine, and then the droughts in the United States. These food prices are going to keep going up and up, and they're going to keep feeding excuse after excuse, narrative after narrative.
Yeah.
So you're going to have to get off that treadmill and start getting more autonomous with your own food growing. Like for us, we had veggie, but that super freeze wiped out all the greens that we had everywhere around the property. The only thing that survived were the spring onions. This only took 6 days to get this lush little tray up here.
Seriously?
And we have greens right there, and all it is black-eyed peas.
Yeah, let's see that. I want to see that. Those microgreens, they look 4 or 5 inches tall already.
Yeah, and we have grow lights as well. I have programmable grow lights, are actually dialable. It's almost like a coffee shop bulb where you can turn it up higher.
Okay.
700 nanometers. You can turn it down 500, whatever. You can adjust the brightness on the grow light, and that thing wasn't very much. How much was it? $90. But to be able to get fresh veg out when all of your other resources have failed, supermarkets, incredible expensive, very low selection right now. And our own vegetables that we were growing wiped out in the super freeze. So then this is our third backup to the backup. Amish aren't open right now, so we can't really get anything out of their gardens and their greenhouses. They don't open until April, and they'll probably just have lettuce when the season first starts. But between now and then, we have a 2-month gap here before we can replant our garden. So what are you going to do? Everybody needs to ask themselves this question. If you get in the same situation like we are and I am, where's your fresh veg going to come from? It's really important you have fresh vegetable in your diet, not just eating out of a can and survival food.
Oh, this is big because, everything you're talking about is what we've been talking about on our podcast here for the last year and a half. And, trying to get people to understand how important it is to build that parallel economy and build a system where you're reliant on what you can do at your place or what you can do with your neighbors, because those are your immediate quote unquote people, right? When things go bad, we have to have a local economy, and those people right around you, for better or worse, they are going to be our local economy, just like it was way back in, the pioneer days. Am I right, hitting the right spots there?
Yeah, I would say go back to the introduction of the railroad as it was heading across as the settlers were moving west. 1860s, 1870s pioneering lifestyle. We're going to head back to that.
Yep.
But we're also going to have a lot of technology intertwined with it. So you see some of those futuristic movies in the 1870s, 1880s where mad inventor, mad scientist had tech in the 1800s, Well, it'll be something like that. Some of our tech now will still move through with us, but a lot of the systems and the way we do are going to revert back to victory gardening, using horses perhaps if we have no other way to move from point A to point B, or plow, that sort of thing. I could see us really heading back into, you're going to need to filter your own water, know your water sources, know your neighbors, and work together to defend all that perhaps.
Outcast, what do you have to say? I know you have some questions right here.
What David is talking about here is, self-sufficiency, cooperation with your neighbors, so we can survive this fake event that they're going to be inflicting on us.
Yeah, this is an artificial shortage being pushed in, like the fertilizer disruption that we're seeing across the planet, which will reduce crop yields. In addition to what we're seeing with the Hunga Tonga eruption and all the different water vapor emissions into the atmosphere. Now, for those of you out there, that single eruption put 10% more water vapor in the atmosphere in a single set of days. So all the atmospheric precipitation, or all the precipitable water is the proper term for it, moisture that could get wrung out in some shape, form, or fashion out of the atmosphere, that was a static 100% up until Tonga, and it suddenly increased by 10%. So you're going to have to imagine that there'll be more cloud cover, heavier rainfalls, atmospheric circulation will be disrupted. And then at the same time, in this one layer of the atmosphere, it's called the mesosphere, and it's above the stratosphere and above the ozone layer. They have a huge amount of ice crystal clouds up there because of the same eruption. But what happens is the little surfaces of these little tiny ice crystals is where the breakdown of ozone occurs. And then chlorine and bromine, catalyst is the proper name for that, also occurs on the surfaces of the ice crystals. So if you have these polar stratospheric clouds, noctilucent clouds, the ones that are so far up and they kind of waft along in different colors that you'll see depending on which hemisphere, the amount of that surface area for ozone to get broken down, we're going to have a runaway ozone depletion event, and they'll just be like, well, how did that happen? It's more humans. They'll try to circulate it back to us doing something to the planet ever versus looking at a natural cycle.
Mm. Well,
that'll be a first indicator.
So David, in your opinion, how much of this is natural and they are capitalizing on it, and how much of it are they able to geoengineer and or cause?
Well, the two separate sets of variables. One would be the economy and the actual breakdown of supply chain and the actual disruption of farm inputs to lower yield on purpose. Now, that's purely man-made and pure disruption on purpose. The geoengineering and the stratospheric aerosol injection, that's a pretty well-established science by now. There was a company called Make Sunsets who said, if you give us money, we'll offset carbon credits, and you can sell those on the market. We'll spray a certain number of kilograms of whatever up in the sky and then try to block the sunlight out for you. Ionic heaters, and they're talking about using HAARP to try to change the trajectory of an asteroid that's off planet. So you have to think about how incredibly powerful the technology is now if they're going to try to manipulate off-planet objects. But I don't know how, they would be able to bust through the thermosphere up through the troposphere and past that electric boundary layer, for a better term, of the magnetosphere before it goes into space. There's an electric boundary layer there. So I don't know exactly, how they would really get precise, because there's going to be an interference wave up there once they try to exit out off the planet, literally outside the atmosphere to change or whatever they want to do, perturb the orbit of this asteroid. So that's their newest toy. So if you think they're at that level where they can actually manipulate asteroids off the planet that are swinging by the Earth, then what can they do with our cloud cells at 30,000, 40,000 feet up, 20,000 feet up?
Yeah, they're definitely putting everything in there: radium or strontium, barium, aluminum, everything. I mean, we get into the climate or geoengineering on this show a lot too, and always playing clips that I find to put in there, or just show the audience that these things are happening. There are patents on these machines. we can't talk about climate change unless we talk about the climate changers, because it seems to me like they are the ones destroying this planet. If they just leave Mother Nature alone, it'll fix itself if it's not too late. From what I'm hearing a lot, they've been monkeying around with this since the 1940s. Have they ruined it to a point now where it's too late to fix it? I mean, I would think not. As long as they pull everything back and stop, can the planet heal itself?
We have to realize, Outcast, I'll continue answering the question here to dovetail on that. We're going through a series of natural changes that haven't been seen in the minimum of 400 years. If you look at NASA and the Space Agency, European Space Agency, they all conclude that in solar cycle 26, we're coming into the lowest solar activity for 2 full solar cycles. That's about, 22 years of extreme low solar activity with almost no sunspots. Last time that occurred was in the Maunder minimum. It started in 1640 and it ran to approximately 1670.
That was referred to as a mini ice age, correct?
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah. Is that also when the river Thames froze solid for, over in London? That river froze.
The ice fairs, and that wasn't London. That was a famous example, but it got so bad in what was that, Finland and that area and more northerly Norway, when the sea ice came in and it kept blocking off the resupply. They would go back, and some of these towns had emptied out 90% after that 30 years. They went back. Population was only 10% of prior to what it was in, say, 1620.
Wow.
It was a massive population pusher anyway. There's a fingerprint for this thing. It's population migration, economic collapse, and then government restructuring, because the way that the farm called Earth is being overseen right now, that farm stewardship needs to change. They'll change management techniques in that, because hungry, starving people, you need to do a little bit different. But you notice every one of these cycles that comes out, the cycle of governance also changes with that, because there's a vibratory frequency either downstepping or upstepping with that. So currently we're going to be rising in the vibration. So every day, every week, every month, the frequency, the vibrational, how fast it's moving in vibration and frequency is increasing.
Right.
So something that was evolved for, suppression or overseership of humanity in the 1600s when we were in the dark iron, sure isn't going to work when we're getting into more of an air state or an electrified fastness, quickness. That will have to change also the way that the planet is ruled, if you will.
Well,
that's where our chance to take that power back is right then.
Yeah, it's, so Davos just just finished up wrapping up their, the World Economic Forum meeting at Davos. Those are the people you're referring to, correct?
You didn't go? Oh, come on. I thought you would have gone.
They didn't send me an invite. So, but yeah, that's, remember that was a conspiracy theory that never happened. Those people weren't, they don't do that. That we were fighting that battle forever. Now everybody understands these things are happening. And they've been going on for decades. Okay, so now they're just so far out in the open with this stuff. What is your suggestion as far as you just said there? We can, we have a chance to take over. I would love that. Yeah,
like everything that has been talked about that people see into the future a little bit of control mechanisms, weaponizing systems for the detriment of society. Once you start talking about that, it's a conspiracy. But then once it's actually in play and you can't take it out of play without a large amount of destruction at that point, then you're allowed to talk about it. It's not conspiracy anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And the simplest way is to just say no in the system. And that's going to be a very difficult thing moving forward, especially when the economy collapses and they roll out the digital rationing card along with your universal basic income or your digital Fed dollar or central bank digital currencies. Those are going to come out in unison, where the digitized availability to go into a supermarket and buy food and then the means to actually purchase that food that the supermarket accepts will be intertwined into one. You're going to have to make that choice whether you get on that system or you don't. And this is where I really believe that the split in humanity is going to occur. Some people talk about transhumanism. That's great. That's many decades down the road.
Yeah.
I'm talking about immediacy within 1 to 2 years of us needing to make the mental clarity, choice. You're either going to accept that system or you're not, because once you get on it, you are at complete subservience to that system. And how many people have panicked when their internet goes off? How many people panic when they can't sign into their online banking? And how many people panic when their card doesn't work?
Yeah.
Either working at sliding it to purchase an item in a credit card at a pay through point, or you can't, your card doesn't work to get money out of the ATM. Okay, that can be turned off in a moment's notice in an instant, just because you say the wrong thing. This conversation very well what might have all three of us and our our access to that system cut off because we spoke ill of the overseers for this time. But they really hang out and are relegated to a denser kind of energy medium, where I think they're struggling to continue to maintain control, because this is the whole thing I've noticed. The awareness is rising for most people. They just feel it instinctively in the air, like there's just something that's not right. Something's changing. And, people are starting to get into that a little bit, to try to delve into it, to figure it out. And whoosh, here comes the next big global event to put fear in people's minds and control them. And then that, vibration, you can just explain it away as fear. But maybe it's more of awakening, but it's an interference wave that's put out there on purpose for the masses who are awakening.
Yeah, and definitely there's, we always talk about there's a great awakening and we have the great reset, and which one is going to, win out. God willing, it's going to be us with the awakening. That's all it's going to take. Outcast, I know you're going to have something to jump in here.
Yeah. So, I'm kind of being redundant for our regular listeners, but the way I like to word it is the overseers, I believe they have the ability to read every algorithm of every opinion. Not only is their phone listening to us, but they can see our memes and our texts to each other. They can read what's going on online. So they realize that people are waking up at an exponential rate. So then they take their very slow as molasses plans of the past and they put it into hyperdrive, which causes more people to wake up. So what we're living through is this race to see if they can put the shackles on us, or if humanity wakes up in time. And I think that everything, I sense that everything's in play. Another thing I want to kind of comment on too, that David was kind of touching on for me, I'm in sales. And I talk to people of all walks of life at all ages, every day, all week long. And you're right, everybody senses something's off. It's interesting because it's a great springboard for me to red pill them. But when I do this, I'm finding it's getting easier to present information, but it is downright scary to people who are just catching on just now. It's kind of like they've chosen to, or maybe it wasn't a choice, but they've had their head in the sand. Now they can't ignore it. Like, I even find this geoengineering conversation easier to red people with than, let's say, other topics that we've seen in the media, because they can see it. Regular people who normally are not paying attention know that this is not normal weather. Yeah, I have noticed that. I'm like, whatever happened to the big fluffy clouds when we were kids in the blue sky? I'm like, yeah, that's a good point. So these people are kind of scared to wake up, but they realize they don't have a choice. It's very interesting. People they're ready. They're kind of waking up, but they're also terrified to figure out how behind they are the eight ball of learning. I don't know if that jives with anything you were thinking, David, but I just want to throw that in the mix.
Well, if you fast forward down the timeline here, 200-300 years, the vibration frequency would be so high that they would actually probably visibly disappear out of your visual spectrum. That's the whole thing about these vibratory energies on wheels of cycles here, the Kali Yuga, the Dwapara Yuga. The Indian Vedas had mapped that out pretty cleanly. Mayans and a fair few others back in the past had shown energetically where we go through as our solar system transits around through the spiral arm of the galaxy. These are known points of energetic change for the world and humanity. The sun behaves differently. Our magnetic field behaves differently. The brains, since they're magnetic hemispheres in your head there, will interpret information in the world around you differently. And as much as they want to stop this, it is not going to stop. It is going to continue to be that race where they'll pull ahead, they'll pull ahead, pull ahead, pull ahead. So what is this immediacy of getting us off old systems? You go back to the 1600s and you think how the world was ruled. It was ruled by the church and the most barbaric acts that you could do toward other humans: sacrifice, kill, maim, enslave, burn, pillage, and then subjugate. And that was pretty much the way it was done. They can't do that any longer. The vibration frequency is literally rising to the point that manifestation of a world at that time literally can't hold state where we sit today in the vibration field around us. This is why there's this urgency to move to digitization, because it needs to move faster. Everything that would be a control mechanism is going to have to move at light speed along with it's not just us, Wayne. Look at all these changes across the solar system and all the other planets having changes. Neptune's atmosphere reversed about 2 years ago. Jupiter had 10x the auroras. You got X-rays jumping off of Uranus out onto the rings in the visible spectrum, or just like you see an X-flare coming off the sun. Jupiter, about a year ago, had the minerals in the crust start emanating with auras coming out. Jupiter doesn't have Mars doesn't have a magnetic field like we have North Pole, South Pole. So the interaction there was coming directly out of the minerals in the crust, causing aurora to glow out of the sun, in different wherever huge mineral veins are in Mars crust. And, we're right in this whole, we're closer to the sun than most of the other planets. So obviously we're going to have a greater effect. And then you start to have to think about toroid looping fields and torsion physics and how things are spinning and how looping fields of magnetism can increase in effect or decrease in effect. And it is a race against the clock for what you consider the global parasites to try to implement and have these systems in play, like literally 1 second ahead of you, to keep that fastness and quickening transition in their ball court. And they're losing it. And this is the whole thing, that the fear is being used so quickly and so much and so densely across populations, is if they're afraid they won't notice the awakening and they won't partake in using those energies to send their thoughts into the vibratory field and also use their physical bodies to join with others to find solutions outside of these, what we consider regularized delivery systems that we so much rely on, supply chains, etc. Maybe that's too woo-woo. I don't know.
No, it's interesting. It's fascinating. David, do you put any stock in the polar shift, the pole shifting?
Well, it depends on what magnitude of shift you're talking about. The polar wander we're experiencing now, orders of magnitude above. But yeah, could the magnetic poles actually flip over on themselves? Yes, it's happened in history many a time. Geophysical pole shift, like Charles Hapgood refers to, where there's separation for some unknown period of time, where there's no magnetic field and the crust and the core just kind of slide off of each other, and then eventually, when a magnetic field's reestablished, they lock back in place. So that explains the tilt of our Earth, not on the ecliptic. Like, you look at other planets, it's perfectly to the horizon. So the equator of the sun is the equator of the planet out. Now, there's many of those. Ours is not. Neptune is not. And Venus go in the opposite direction. Yeah, I mean, there's a few anomalies in the solar system, but, what caused ours to tilt off like that? And according to the ancient stories, it tilts around, and then it'll eventually flip back straight up again. But yeah, these things are absolute. Are you referring to Douglas Vogt's work, where he's talking about the micronova in 2047, I believe?
I'm sorry, not my expertise, but I had an older brother who passed away, and he was utterly fascinated with all things celestial, and he was telling me that was a possibility that we were looking at, and that very few people would survive that type of event. Is that what you understand as well?
Yeah, the world population would probably shrink down to about 10 million people.
Okay.
That's a globalist
It's happened
dream.
many times before. So the reason that you're here and we're having this conversation is those 10 million have brought the world back up to population. It crashed again. They brought it back up. It crashed again. We go through these routine expansions to what we see now, 8 billion people. If it crashed down to 1 billion and you look back over a 1,000-year time frame, that would barely be registerable on the entire time frame of things. And who knows what the history would be anyway. But it does seem humans are quite resilient. There's always going to be pockets across the planet. You're just going to be at the right place at the right time, and there'll be a safety spot somewhere.
Interesting.
If it were to happen, it would be a terrifying event, and it would change the psyche of humanity. It would take us back to, you would be a hunter-gatherer again, a hunter-gatherer society. Now, there's many a story of more technologically advanced, advanced civilizations that were from the ancient times that would come back and rescue us. And everywhere you look across history, when there is one of these events where, it gets down to a few million people left or a few million breeding pairs of humans left on the planet, or some celestial outside intervention or guidance that teaches things like math and agriculture and this sort of thing, and it starts over again. It's almost like a clock alarm built into the celestial mechanics for a reset on the planet here. So when they say great reset, and I look at all of these things happening from this grand solar minimum inbound affecting crop production, once in a 200-year eruption, now definitely affecting southern hemisphere crop production, the changes of vibration and frequency and the urgency to get us on to new systems. It does seem that the elite parasites understand the cycle. They're riding on top of the natural cycle. They knew the inbound start date would be approximately, the beginning of the talk of global warming, because these changes would have a visible effect that eventually everybody would see. Now look at it. They just keep pointing. Every time there's a massive event that can be explained electromagnetically, they point to global warming as the excuse, so nobody will, it's global warming.
Right.
Every time, 100% of the time, everything is global warming. Any event that you could see, they're even talking about El Nino La Nina being influenced by CO2. And I'm like, wait, well, that's a pressure difference caused by the sun that changes the pressure flow between off of Tahiti and over out to South America. Like, that has nothing to do with CO2.
Right.
But this whole thing is switching into an El Nino year. They're going to be blaming it on, it's getting hotter, it's CO2. No, it's a cycle from the sun that dictates the pressure difference and how winds move across the Pacific Ocean.
Right. And see, that's what gets me so worked up about all this climate change nonsense. Like you said, I've also heard the same thing where they like to, they know the cycles that are coming. And that's when they like to work their, regime tactics or whatever you want to call it. So they can sort of time those up just as a time for today. And then they gaslight the hell out of us, talking about, everything, like you said, everything being climate change, global warming, a cooling, whatever it is. What happened to acid rain? Where'd all that stuff go? Did people forget about, what's his name? Maurice Strong, right? Remember, he's the one that with the Club of Rome and all that. But they never want to, of course, they're not going to tell us the truth about it. And they're always going to downplay anything that we bring up about this stuff. So the gaslighting continues. What do you suggest that people can, other than listen to alternative medias like this?
Well, and those are the people of like mind that gravitate toward each other. And, if you believe in those kind of philosophies, that similar vibration attracts similar vibration. And, if you believe thought creates reality and you're able to put out into the field around you of wanting to get through this without certain systems, wanting to make this planet a better place to live, wanting to live more in harmony with what the creator had put on this planet versus this electronic soup that we're not supposed to be in.
Yeah.
These kind of like vibrations really find each other. That's why there's really cool backpack spots. Like, and I backpacked a lot when I was younger, 90s, 2000 stuff. But wherever you would turn up to a really cool spot, really cool village or whatever, cool town, it was the same kind of like-minded people that for some reason all had congregated in the same place together. It's that same pulling, if you will, of magnetic effects. And if I could make one super wild call here, we're going to have catastrophic ozone collapse here, and they're not going to be able to explain why, except they'll blame humans again. The mesosphere ice cloud crystallization, it is going to be a runaway loss of ozone, and you'll start to hear about August, and it'll be so unexplainable, so vast, so gargantuan of a collapse that there really be no explanation for it at all, how quickly it collapsed back down into far exceeding anything that what is in the year 2000. It'll eclipse the low or the largest and the widest or the least amount of ozone in the atmosphere in the year 2000. Maybe that'll wake people up. Maybe the events have to get bigger and bigger where they can't really be explained by the current narrative before people can kind of look past that veil. But delivering information to them, And like I said, a lot of people are willing to wake up now, are really much more willing to accept different ideas as to why the world it is today. Because if you look at the world, it's just a normal, same, common sense human being, and you look at the world today, you go, there's a huge problem. Something is very wrong. This is an insane planet. How did it get here? I wanted to talk about hand-cranked radios for just a second because I think they're incredibly important. I myself, I did hours and hours of research on the best hand-cranked radio that could also be a phone charger, emergency light, be able to listen to radio stations, the NOAA weather station in case something happened and you were power out, you could still know what the weather was coming. I personally own this one, the Eaton Red Cross FRX3. It's all hand cranked and there's a small solar panel on top of it. So it's multiple options for recharging, including plug-in. So if something were to happen, hand cranking is the next best option. I would love solar, but it might be a cloudy day. You might be inside a house, but you're going to have to create the power somehow. You hand crank it and ergonomically it slides right in like a book on a bookshelf. I can't believe how long the battery charge lasts on this thing. Even if you leave it up somewhere, like I say, on a bookshelf or in a closet for 6 months, it still has almost a full charge after that period of time.
These crank lights and radios are a must-have. The fact is, if you live anywhere where there's going to be weather, you're going to want to know what's going on. You're going to want to be able to see. And not only that, you're going to want to be able to charge your devices so that you can communicate if the power is out. This is something that you should have if you live anywhere where there's tornadoes, hurricanes, blizzards, etc. It's not whether or not the power is going to go out. It's just when you know that's going to happen. So these are something that you should have handy with you in your car and your backpack. 2 or 3 of them actually would be a good thing to have in several places so that you know that you're going to be able to have light. You're going to have information and maybe communication. Those are 3 main things that you need. And plus, it's cool. You can listen to the radio, which makes the time go by if you're waiting for anything, waiting for the power to come back on. You're going to want to keep your mind occupied, and you're going to want to be able to see what you're doing and also be able to communicate if there is the ability to communicate, and you don't want your devices to be dead when that happens.
In an emergency, you would know where people were moving to. For example, out here in East Tennessee, we have massive wildfires sometimes, and they'll be on the radio broadcasting exactly where the fires are moving. And this is off of what you consider like your AM, FM channels that you would get on your car radio. It depends on which frequency that they're using for that, but they will absolutely tell you where emergency resources are stationed. So if you have to abandon your car, you could be able to get to another place as long as you know the roads or you might have a map. You'll be able to get to some help or main roads where there's emergency vehicles transiting up and down there. Have this on the go that it's be able to put it in your hand and still listen to something. It's very lightweight as well. What happens with your communications or even listening to something to be able to understand what's going on in the environment around you? And that's the key to surviving. And Ransom, I know you said this a few times, is understanding your environment, being able to manipulate your environment and being able to move through that environment to get yourself to safety, to reassess the situation.
Not only that, this is one of the cheapest ways to have insurance so that, whatever happens, if you're on the move, if you have to grab your bag and go, or if you're just at home trapped when the power's out, not only do you know what's going on, but you know if the situation is going to worsen. Imagine all those people that were in several of the different hurricanes that we've had the last couple of years where the power was out. There were a lot of people that didn't know that was coming, and unfortunately, they're no longer with us. But I'm sure that people that were prepared and had some radio, they knew where to go. They knew where the relief aid was going to be. They knew which directions the storms were coming, and they knew which directions the water was coming from. So this is a must-have for anybody that wants to know what's going on, and also just having the light.
And you can click on the link in the description box below. And remember, any purchase that you make with the links, whether it be through the podcast in the description box or on the videos across the multiple platforms after we stream, helps us keep this type of information and this show on air so we can continue to bring information and share this information so then you can share with others. And this is truly how it's going to be, is sharing of information, forming communities, and have others that also have some of the same information, so we can work as a group versus being on your own alone. That's going to make a huge world of difference, sharing information in communities.
If you wanted to start prepping and taking it serious to get some of these very inexpensive tools that are necessities, why not be prepared for what might happen? Click some of the links, help yourself.
If you appreciate this type of information, click on that link in the description box below. Support our broadcast, our continued mission of bringing you information that can enhance our lives, make our lives more comfortable as we move through this transition,